Hi, this is Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. Today I am going to talk about the Taranis pen from Sheaffer. This pen was introduced in 2013 for the 100th anniversary Sheaffer's incorporation, which was in 1913. And it was designed by the architect and teacher and industrial designer Charles Debbas. So there's actually going to be two videos. The first video is going to be on the design of the pen, how it writes and looks. And the second video is the interview that I did with him, and where we discuss how the process happened, issues of compromise, and also his history with Sheaffer, and how before he came to Sheaffer in the late 90s, he designed the Ergo pen, which really was a remarkable innovation, a complete rethinking of what a pen should look like and how it should feel, and has actually been something that was a great help to people who had disabilities and found it hard to write. So that's coming up, and we'll follow this video very quickly. In general, I think we tend to ignore or overlook the whole design process, even within the pen community. I think that's because perhaps that so many of the great vintage pens of the early period, we don't necessarily know who's actually responsible for designing how they looked. They're kind of anonymous people or teams of people. So I think this is a great opportunity to actually talk to someone who was involved in that process and can sort of tell you something about how it happens. Of course, it's always going to be different in different situations, but it really was wonderful to talk with Charles, and he's really a charismatic person. So watch for that. I have three of these pens. The black, which is one that I'm probably going to talk the most about and give a writing sample and a drawing sample of. This is called Stormy Night. This one is called Steel Chrome. And this one, which was introduced, I think, 5 years ago, is a collaboration with Ferrari. Charles Debbas actually was not responsible for the way in which they collaborated on this particular pen, although he told me that he had ideas prior to them making this pen about what a Ferrari pen should look like. Now, the pen uses a Sheaffer script cartridge and also a proprietary Sheaffer converter. The name Taranis comes from the Celtic god of thunder, who was worshipped in Britain and Gaul. And as a figure, he's not just the thunder god, but he also is associated with wheels. So he's often shown with his thunderbolt and a wheel towards the side. And as we know, wheels traditionally represent the cycles of time, the up and down fortunes of fate, but also in ancient times, they must have evoked technology and transportation, since the wheel was so essential to not only travel and trade, but also various large-scale construction that involved pulleys and levers. The wheel attribute of Taranis goes well with one of Debbas's inspirations, automobile design, and the sleekness of race cars in the 1950s and 60s. He also was clearly looking at the Parker 51 and also, the whole history of mid-century modern design. Another pen that clearly is his inspiration is the Lamy 2000, which he talked about with great admiration. Pens are almost exactly the same size, posted and unposted. And they both have semi-hooded nibs, unlike the Parker 51, which has a hooded nib. They actually posted, they're almost exactly the same size, all three, but when the Parker is closed, it's a little bit smaller. They also all have slip-on caps rather than screw-on caps. It's interesting, though, that the Taranis has a much longer clip. The clip is a bit stiff on the Taranis, and I think that's something that would have been different if Debbas had been able to do everything that he'd wanted to do. In terms of the clip doesn't say Sheaffer, but it does have the distinctive white dot that in Sheaffer's heyday used to signal that it had a lifetime warranty. But at the time when the pen was introduced, Taranis was introduced, I believe the warranty was 3 years. The pen looks the most distinctive when you take the cap off, because then you see one of the things that makes it look so original, which is this metal band that actually Debbas wanted not to be so bright and shiny, but also has the logo Sheaffer across it, and it comes around the pen. He wanted this to go all the way down the middle of the pen, but they decided to make it just the section, for various reasons, to be smaller than that. But it still has quite an ample section, and it's very comfortable. If you look at the first prototype for the pen, you'll see that originally Debbas wanted the pen to go from kind of square shape to a triangular shape, which he thought would be more ergonomic and would look great. But they insisted that really people like their pens to be circular, and at least in the middle. He then did go back to the tradition of Sheaffer pens, and particularly pens like the fountain pen for men, that have this square form on the top and bottom and then are round in the middle. And he repeated that in his design for the Taranis. I think when you look at it this way, the pen's other big inspiration is the Pilot vanishing point. And you can see, I think, how close they look, particularly if the point is sticking out. So it's a bit as if the Lamy 2000 and the Pilot vanishing point had a child. It would look something like the Taranis. Interestingly enough, Debbas's original idea was to make this pen into a retractable pen. But for various reasons, they decided not to go in that direction. I think primarily that it would have been way too expensive to do it. The pen is pretty heavy when it's posted. It's 36 grams. When you unpost it, it's 26 grams. So, but it's not, incredibly heavy, and it feels very substantial. When the pen was first introduced, it came in a variety of colors, including blue and green. And there was a gunmetal color, and there's the black and the chrome. Around 5 years ago, Sheaffer collaborated with Ferrari and came up with this pen. The black version of the pen came in this simple windowed box, but I believe that when it first came out in 2013, it was in a bigger black box, not unlike the box that the Ferrari pen comes in, which is very elaborate. I think the black box was similar, but the Ferrari pen comes in this beautiful red box. They both included both cartridges, the traditional script cartridges, and Sheaffer's converter that works with those cartridges. Though I think sometimes when you get the pen from some discounted sellers, it might not come with a converter. I would check before you buy it. Interestingly enough, Debbas himself had various ideas for collaborating with Ferrari, and was very interested in designing a pen that evoked a sports car. But the actual Taranis Ferrari pen did not really have Debbas's input. And what they did is they basically decided to just put the logo onto the pen and make it red. And then when you open it up, it has the Ferrari logo along here on this design. And, so that's rather superficial. And yet I still like the way it evokes the car, and I think it's a beautiful color. And since I can't afford to own a Ferrari, this probably is as close as I can get. I think one of the reasons that the collaboration with Ferrari worked in the end is that Charles Debbas said that another one of his inspirations was the great cars of the 1950s and 60s and sports cars of that period. I think he built into the pen that same sense of a kind of streamlining, in the sense that the car is flying through space, and I think that comes across in the pen design, as it does come across in a lot of sleek mid-century modern designs. And so I think that works with the beautiful Ferrari colors and the idea of the sort of Formula One race team. So I kind of enjoy this, and it's interesting that Debbas himself buys these and gives them to friends. In general, I would say that Debbas in his interview talks about all the compromises, and of course he had ambitions for the pen and the way it worked out. But in general, he's still happy with the way in which it looks and feels. And I have to say, and it comes out in my writing and drawing samples, that it writes really, really well. I have a medium and a broad version of it. It comes also in a fine. And it just has a lovely feel to it. It feels great in the hand, and it writes very smoothly, particularly for a nib that is so narrow. I'm impressed with it. I particularly like the broad version of the pen. So that is really terrific. And I think this all worked out very well. As Debbas says, he stands by it, even though they were compromised. And that's really the way industrial design often works. I was struck by the fact that he wasn't really given a lot of ideas about what he could or couldn't do in the beginning. Basically, he came up with his ideal pen, and they kept saying to him, no, 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 and then he would change the design accordingly, and they would come up with something that would work. So it's an interest, to me that's quite interesting. I had imagined more that it would be a process in which they said the pen needs to do this, 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 but he said, no, in this case that wasn't how it worked. So, as always, I'm going to do a writing sample, and I do some I draw with the black pen, some hydrangeas. Please, if you enjoyed this content, subscribe, and also please watch the interview with Charles Debbas, which will come on this channel in the next week, I hope. So I'm using the broad version. This is the Sheaffer Taranis. And this is the broad. It comes in fine, medium, and broad. This is tacky Sumi ink and Rhodia paper. It is very wet and very smooth, with just a hint of feedback. No line variation, however. But it is very pleasant. I really like the way this writes. flow problems. Just really, really pleasant. When I interviewed Charles Debbas, he talked about how he wanted it to be like the Lamy 2000. I don't think it's quite that good, but it's a steel nib. And for a steel nib, it really is fantastic. And also it's a hooded nib, which sometimes the cheaper pens can be scratchy. But this is terrific.